Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Right.
And today, we are going to do a deep dive on a topic that I think probably all of us can relate to,
Okay.
which is how much we learn from fictional sources.
Yes.
So I'm talking about everything from like the oldest stories that we tell each other, myths, legends, that kind of thing,
All right.
all the way up to modern movies and video games.
hmm
These narratives that, we engage in just for fun, just for entertainment.
Yeah.
But it's kind of amazing and maybe even a little bit surprising how easily our minds kind of absorb
Sure.
what we encounter in these fictional worlds.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when we think about learning, often what comes to mind are things like classrooms and textbooks and documentaries. But stories have actually been teaching us things for, well, forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of the most effective ways to share knowledge, and this deep dive is really going to explore that, all those fascinating and sometimes pretty unexpected ways that we learn when we get caught up in fiction. So we're going to give you a clear picture of why educators use fiction. That sometimes tricky balance between just being entertained and actually being accurate, and also what's going on in our brains while all this is happening.
Right.
What's the cognitive psychology of learning from fictional sources?
Exactly.
And get ready for some aha moments, too, because I think you'll be really surprised by how easily we can pick up not just accurate information, but totally false information from narratives and maybe not even realize it's happening.
All right.
So let's get started and unpack this really intriguing topic.
Okay, so maybe let's start with why educators even use fiction in the first place,
Right.
because it seems on the surface of it a little bit strange.
It does, but it's got such a long history, too. I mean, if you think about it,
Right.
using stories to teach.
Absolutely. I mean, if you go way back to ancient Greece, the Iliad, that wasn't just for entertainment,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that was a key way they passed down history.
Sure.
Talked about geography, even, taught right from wrong, morals.
Yeah.
And this is, not just the Greeks. I mean, you see this across all these ancient cultures, right?
Right.
The Aeneid, Beowulf, the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
I mean, these epic poems that are, they're blending these historical figures and events, but then they also have like a good dose of, myth and fantasy, right?
Right.
To really get across these, ideas and share knowledge and values.
Yeah, and I think the reason why this has been used for so long and continues to be used is because it sort of taps into the way our brains are wired.
Right.
We gravitate towards stories, so it makes sense that we'd use them for learning.
Right.
It can make the whole process more engaging and ultimately more memorable. But like we said, it does come with some inherent trade-offs.
Yeah.
Which we're going to get into.
Right.
But I think what's interesting, too, is just how much this continues today.
Right.
I mean, in the classroom now, you'll see everything from classic novels,
Right.
The Great Gatsby and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and,
TV shows, right.
TV shows, absolutely. Things like Rome or The Tudors.
Yums, right.
Yeah, Flags of Our Fathers, The Alamo.
I mean, video games.
Oh, tons of those, too. Yeah, Medal of Honor, Call of Duty. Right.
Right.
The Tragedy of Julius Caesar, The Crucible.
I mean, it's just a whole range of media that's being used now.
Right.
And teachers aren't just picking this stuff out of a hat.
Right.
There are some good reasons for this.
Right.
For one thing, fiction can really help students visualize things.
Right.
It allows them to create those concrete pictures in their heads, which can make even abstract ideas a lot easier to grasp.
Right.
And research actually supports this.
Right.
Fiction creates that mental landscape
Right.
that makes learning, so much more immersive.
Right.
And it's not just about visualizing either. I
No.
mean, it's also a great way to get kids talking and thinking critically. Right, get them discussing, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, how many ways can you interpret a character's motivations in a book?
Right.
That's going to lead to, some good discussion.
Absolutely.
To really get them engaged in the material.
It's not just passive learning, it's active learning.
Right.
They have to really think about what's going on.
Right.
And another big one is perspective taking.
Right.
I mean, when you read a story or you're watching a film, you're seeing the world from someone else's point of view.
Right.
And that can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
In fact, studies highlight how fiction can really promote empathy.
Right.
The ability to step into another person's shoes
Yeah.
and understand their viewpoint,
Yeah.
which you don't often get from just, a dry factual report.
Right, exactly. And, we can't forget just how important interest is.
Right.
Right? I mean, teachers will often use fiction to make something that might otherwise be, some pretty dry course content
Yeah.
a lot more exciting. And it's a pretty simple idea, right?
Right.
If the students are interested, they're more likely to spend time studying the material, right?
Yeah.
They're going to remember it better. And
Yeah.
ultimately, their performance is going to be better.
Right.
Their grades are going to go up.
But here's where it gets tricky.
Okay.
Sometimes that initial interest, that spark,
Right.
it can actually lead us down a path that's not so good.
Okay.
Students might end up focusing on all those little exciting details
Right.
that are interesting, but not actually important.
Right.
So, and also what grabs one student's attention might totally miss the mark for another.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's this balancing act.
Right.
Fiction is really good at grabbing attention, but educators have to make sure they're steering that interest in the right direction.
Right. Exactly.
Another reason that educators use fiction is to help us learn how to evaluate information critically,
Right.
to develop those media literacy skills, because
Right.
fiction blends real and made-up elements all the time.
Right.
It's a really good opportunity to kind of analyze sources and think about, what's reliable.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, think about if you were using a film like JFK in the classroom,
Right.
right? You could really use that to get students to, think about how do you dig into different sources of information?
Right.
How do you analyze it?
Yeah,
How do you question what you see?
absolutely. Yeah, and that's such a key skill,
Right.
being able to do that.
Right.
To not just accept anything that's presented to you as fact,
Right.
but to really dig in
Right.
and look for biases.
Right.
What might be missing, whether something's actually accurate or not.
Right. Exactly.
And maybe surprisingly, fiction's also used to just teach course content directly.
Right.
There's actually evidence that students might learn more
More from fictional sources.
from fictional sources than from, nonfiction texts that are covering the same material.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think it probably goes back to that idea of interest.
Right.
If you're interested, you're going to be more engaged, you're going to retain more.
Right.
But there's also just that, the way stories are structured.
Right.
The narrative itself can actually act as a really powerful memory aid.
Okay.
So, they have that flow, they have that organization
Yeah.
that might make the information just easier to recall.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like fiction has, a lot of potential benefits
Right.
for education, but let's talk about the other side of the coin.
Yeah, okay.
Right. What are the potential problems, especially, with regard to accuracy?
Right.
Now, we all know that some fiction is pure fantasy, right?
Right.
That's kind of the point. But a lot of fiction
Sure.
mixes real and imagined elements,
Yeah.
and often including references to real people, real places, real events.
Right. Yeah.
What's
the problem with that? Well, it's worth noting just how much of that is out there.
Okay.
I mean, when you look at popular films,
Okay.
a lot of analysis has shown that a significant portion of them
Okay.
are based on historical events.
Right.
Now, obviously, they take creative liberties.
Right.
But that's, a huge part of our popular culture
Right.
is engaging with history
Right.
through this fictional lens.
Right.
So the danger here is misinformation,
Okay.
right?
Right.
I mean, fiction, by its very nature, isn't held to the same standard as nonfiction. It
Right.
doesn't have to be factually accurate.
Right.
And those inaccuracies, well, sometimes they're huge
Right. And they can be very misleading.
and very misleading.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, a classic example is the film U-571,
Right.
which incorrectly showed Americans capturing the Enigma machine during World War II.
Right.
And there was a huge backlash in the UK
Right.
over that inaccuracy.
Right.
So it shows you how seriously people can take those kinds of historical misrepresentations.
Right.
And the key takeaway here is that even when we know that a film is fiction,
Right.
we can still absorb that wrong information.
Right.
Studies have shown that, people don't question fiction as much.
Right.
We can take it at face value,
Sure. Right.
even when we're aware that it might not be entirely true.
Right.
So just knowing it's fiction doesn't automatically make us immune
Right.
to learning those inaccuracies.
Right. That's a good point. So it seems like maybe the way that we process fiction is different from how we process nonfiction.
Right.
So maybe let's talk a bit more about those differences in structure
Right.
and how we experience them.
Sure.
When we think about nonfiction, like a textbook,
Yeah.
right? It
Right.
usually just kind of presents facts directly
Yeah.
in a logical, organized way.
Right.
Fiction, on the other hand, it's using narrative structure,
Right.
right? It's telling a story. It's got characters. It's got plot. It's got setting.
Right.
All of that.
Right. Right.
And what's interesting is it seems like these different structures actually lead our brains to process the information differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And this is where the material appropriate processing, the MAP framework, comes in.
Okay.
So think about it this way.
Okay.
When you're reading a story,
Right.
your brain is naturally trying to connect all those elements
Right.
to follow the narrative.
Right.
Who are these characters?
Or-
What are they doing?
Right.
What's going to happen next?
Right.
It's what we call relational processing,
Okay.
focusing on the relationships between those pieces of information.
Okay.
Expository text, like textbooks, they tend to encourage item-specific processing.
Okay.
So we focus more on memorizing those individual facts,
Okay.
but not necessarily connecting them in a broader narrative.
Okay. So, like, a good example of this would be, like, if you try to learn from an expository text, something like textbook,
Right.
a task that, forces you to see the connections, like reordering, scrambled sentences.
Right.
That would really help. Right.
Right.
But that same task wouldn't help as much if you were trying to, like, remember a fairy tale.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's already got that relational structure built in.
Right.
And on the flip side,
Right.
a task that makes you focus on those individual details,
Right.
like maybe filling in missing letters and words,
Right.
that would actually help you remember the fairy tale better.
Right.
So it's all about the type of processing that matches the material.
Okay.
And I think when we connect this back to the bigger picture,
Okay.
what MAP really suggests
Okay.
is that we're probably naturally going to learn different things from fiction
Right.
compared to nonfiction.
Right.
So, stories really help us see those connections, that overall picture.
Right.
But we might miss some of the specific details
Right.
along the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, another, I think, really key part of the experience of engaging with fiction is this idea of transportation.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right. So when we get really absorbed in a story, right, through these vivid descriptions, we're connecting with the characters emotionally.
Right.
We're paying attention. We're not, our mind's not wandering.
Right.
We almost feel like we're there.
Right. You're in the world.
In the story.
Yeah.
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 And research has really looked at this,
Right.
the idea of transportation.
Right.
And we often measure it by just asking people,
Right.
how immersed did you feel?
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The more transported we are
Right.
into a narrative,
Okay.
the less likely we actually are to critically evaluate the information.
Wow. Okay. So almost backwards, right?
Yeah.
Like the more we get caught up in the story,
Right.
the less we question if it's actually true.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there have been studies on that.
There have been, yeah.
Okay.
So in one, they had people read these narratives
Okay.
that actually had inconsistencies built into them.
Okay.
And those who reported feeling really transported, really into the story, they noticed way fewer errors
Wow.
than those who were less engaged.
Okay.
It seems like when we're super immersed,
Okay.
our critical thinking just kind of takes a backseat.
So we're not really thinking about,
We're just enjoying the
we're
ride.
just enjoying the ride.
Yeah.
Okay. And does it affect our ability to access what we already know?
It might.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been research that has shown that,
Okay.
after reading a story that subtly contradicts something you probably already know,
Okay.
people can actually be slower to recall those facts.
Okay.
So it's almost like that immersive experience
Okay.
temporarily blocks your ability to bring that existing knowledge to mind.
Right. To use it to judge this new information that you're encountering.
Okay, that's fascinating. So we're, when we're really drawn in, we're more open to just accepting what the story's presenting as true.
Exactly.
Now, what about simply knowing that something is fiction?
Right.
Like, if you know it's a made-up story, does that make a difference in how we process it?
That's a really good question, and it's surprisingly complex.
Okay.
So some research suggests
Okay.
that just labeling something as fiction might not make a huge difference
Okay.
in how we process the information.
Okay. Interesting.
So, for example,
Okay.
people might not even remember later if they read a passage,
Okay.
if it was labeled as fiction or a news report.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't really seem to affect, how much they get absorbed in it.
Okay.
Similarly, how our brains handle information from stories versus, those factual accounts
Okay.
might not change a whole lot,
Okay.
even if we know one's fiction and one isn't.
Okay. So the label itself doesn't seem to matter as much?
Not as much, yeah. So the content, the characteristics of the story itself
Okay.
might be more important
Okay.
than just that fiction label.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so it's not as simple as saying, oh, well, it's just fiction, so it doesn't affect me.
Yeah, no, not that simple.
Right.
Although, there is some evidence that maybe
Okay.
we're less likely to connect information we know is from fiction
Okay.
with our, kind of general knowledge about the world.
Right.
It's almost like we put that story information in a separate little mental box.
Right. It's like, oh, well, that's just a story.
Yeah,
Right. That's not, the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So to recap some of these differences, right? Fiction can contain inaccuracies. We tend to be less critical of it,
Yeah.
especially when we're engrossed in the story.
Yeah.
And the way it's structured helps us see connections, but we might miss some specific details.
Yeah.
And just knowing that it's fiction might not change how we engage with it.
Right.
Now, to really understand how this all works, maybe let's talk about some experiments that have been done.
Okay.
Now, you've done some really interesting research on this, especially using short stories.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
There have been some clever paradigms out there.
So tell us about those.
Well, you've actually done a lot of work with this.
Yeah.
Developing these short stories that are engaging.
Right.
They have good characters, plots.
Right.
But the key is you've embedded these references to general knowledge in them.
Right.
So things that people probably know, and then it's more obscure facts.
Right.
And you've manipulated those in a really insightful way.
Yeah.
So walk me through that.
Yeah. So for every fact that we're interested in, right?
Right.
It could appear in the story in one of three ways.
Okay.
It was either stated correctly,
Okay.
right? It was mentioned, but kind of in a neutral way without giving the specific fact, or it was actually stated incorrectly, right?
Right.
Presenting, this plausible but wrong piece of information.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, for example, if we were looking at, the fact the Pacific is the largest ocean,
Okay.
right?
Right.
The misleading version in the story might say something like, the Atlantic is the largest ocean.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right.
So you're embedding this misinformation.
Right.
Yeah.
But in a way that, sounds plausible.
Right. It fits with the story.
It fits with the story. Right.
Yeah.
So then,
Okay. And what do you do with that?
so after reading the story, the participants would then take a general knowledge test.
Okay.
So we would ask them, questions like, what's the largest ocean on Earth?
Got it.
And that allowed us to really directly see,
Right.
did reading those different versions of the facts and the stories affect their answers?
I see.
Right.
Yeah. And what did you find?
And we consistently found three main things.
Okay.
So first, fiction can be a really effective way to teach accurate information.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
People were more likely to answer correctly on the test
Right.
if they had read the correct fact in the story.
Right.
Compared to if they had read the neutral one.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So stories can be good teachers
Makes sense.
of factual information.
It fits with that idea that the narrative structure, the story itself,
Right.
can make information stick.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's, I think, the really important part, right?
Okay.
We also found that being exposed to misinformation in the story had a negative impact
Okay.
on their correct answers.
Okay. Interesting.
So if they read that misleading information, they were actually less likely
Okay.
to answer that general knowledge question correctly,
Okay.
even compared to the people who had read the neutral version.
Wow. So even that subtle misinformation can actually make people forget what they know.
Or change what they know.
Or change what they know. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So even seemingly harmless inaccuracies can have a real impact on what we think we know.
Yeah. Really highlights the power of those stories.
Right, exactly. And the third thing that we saw
Okay.
pretty consistently was just this high degree of suggestibility.
Okay.
So participants often repeated the errors
Okay.
that they read in the stories on the general knowledge test.
Oh, interesting.
So, if the story said the Atlantic was the largest ocean,
Right.
they were more likely to say, Atlantic on the test.
Wow.
Yeah.
So really taking it in.
Yeah, and this was, we saw these findings over and over again across multiple experiments.
Right, so it's very consistent
Yeah,
across different stories, different groups of people.
exactly.
So it really does point to how powerful those narratives can be.
Right, for better or worse.
For better or worse, yeah.
Yeah, right. Now, we've also done some studies on learning from fictional films.
Oh, yeah, that's another great paradigm.
Right.
So walk me through how that works.
So basically the way that this works is we would have people watch short clips from popular movies.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
And this would be paired with reading nonfiction texts on related historical topics.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
And the interesting thing here is that the films often contain both information that lines up with the text,
Right.
right?
Right.
But then also information that directly contradicts it.
Okay.
Right.
So that's the misinformation we're interested in.
That's the misinformation we're interested in.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So a good example of this is, a study that we did where we used the film Amadeus,
Okay.
right?
Right.
And then paired that with a factual text about Mozart.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So both the text and the movie correctly showed that Mozart performed in royal courts before he was 10 years old.
Okay.
Right. So that's consistent.
That's consistent information.
That's the consistent information, right?
Sure.
But the movie also portrayed Mozart as having, very immature behavior,
Okay.
whereas the text described him as being, very respectful and mature.
Okay.
So that's inconsistent.
That's inconsistent. Okay.
That's the misleading information.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we had a control group that just read the text. So
Okay.
we could compare, what happens when you add the film,
Okay.
what changes.
Right.
And participants were also told to focus on the information in the text for the test afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, so we're really telling them, the text is what matters.
Right. Right.
Pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And what did you find?
Yeah. So what did you find?
So what we found was really interesting.
Okay.
When the film accurately portrayed information from the text,
Mhm.
it actually helped people learn that information.
Oh, interesting.
So if they saw that consistent information, they were more likely to remember it later
Okay.
from the text.
So when it's accurate, it actually helps.
Exactly.
It reinforces.
Yeah, it reinforces.
Right.
Like seeing something visually can really help you solidify what you're reading.
Right. Right.
Right.
Like it all comes together.
Yeah, exactly. But, and here's the, but just like with the short stories, we also saw these negative effects.
Yeah.
So participants who